to keep your self-control, what you do is you look at your trading system and you apply rewards based on how well you execute your trades, not based on whether it's a winner or a loser.
Two traders, Darren and Walter, pull back the curtain on profitable trading systems, consistent money management, and profitable psychological triggers. Welcome to the Two Traders podcast.
Welcome back to Two Traders. It's Walter here. Hello, Darren.
Hello, Walter.
So today we have this question: what is more important for the trader? Is it risk control or self-control? Now, I'd like to take a crack at this one. My thinking here is I'm not going to cop out and say they're both important or it depends or whatever. Those are the easy cop outs. And it's true, it does depend, right? But if I painted into a corner and I had to choose one, I would say risk control. I would say that if you said, look, because my thinking is that if you've got your risk under control, in theory, it's harder to sabotage, right? So I guess self-control to me sort of insinuates that you're talking about someone who can't control themselves and can't really, just wants to overtrade or do some crazy things and paint outside the lines, right? And I guess if you've got your risk down, like, I guess the way I look at it is reverse it. What if you had your risk completely out of whack, but your self-control was great? Well, I still think you'd probably lose. But if you have your risk under control and your self-control is still a little bit loopy, perhaps you still have a chance. There's no guarantees. But perhaps you still have a chance. So I'm going to put my chip on risk control. What say you, Darren? What do you say?
Right. Well, I don't want to cop out either, but I feel a strong drawing to copping out here. I will partly agree with you, risk control over self-control, but I still feel that both of them are like stage 2, and if stage 1 isn't right, it doesn't really matter on either of them, really, because I think they're both really closely connected. Look, the interesting thing about self-control is if you're focusing on self-control, then you're probably not going to have any self-control. Because the interesting research on self-control is that it's like a resource that is not bottomless. It's like what happens in your brain with self-control is like a pool of resources with self-control. And if you use up that self-control resource, then on, say, one decision, then on the next decision, you're going to be more susceptible to break it. It's going to be harder to stick to it on the second one. So, like people who are trying to diet that will sort of walk past, say, a donut shop and they like donuts, they might be able to say, no, look, I'm on a diet, I'm going to walk past that shop. And then they get down the road and they see McDonald's and they haven't got the same you haven't got the pool of resources to stop yourself the second time. And this research was done by a guy from Iowa University. His name is William M. Hedgecock, and he's done loads of really interesting neuroscience stuff that relates to financial markets and trading. And this is really interesting. So if you're just saying, look, okay, I've tested my system, I know it works, but I keep making this mistake of not waiting for my entry or taking my profits early. All I need to do is learn a bit of self-control. Okay, so, right, you've got that at the forefront of your mind. You start trading Monday. The first opportunity where you've got to control yourself comes up. You do all right. The second one comes up. You've got no resources left to deal with it. So you make the same mistake again. And, you see this with traders all the time. They can't break this self-control problem that we all have. That's why it's so common in traders. And the other interesting thing that he picked up from this was that if you, and this goes back to your thing about saying the daily time frame is a better time frame to start on, is that after you having to use some self-control, if you have a break from that activity that's like making you have to control yourself, it's actually, this pool of resources in your brain gets replenished. So your idea of, trading less and having less decisions to make, or difficult risk-based decisions, is actually really on the mark. So, that's kind of my thought. I mean, the self-control thing, to me, is not something that you can rely on. You can't just say, well, I'm going to use self-control, because we can't do it. We haven't got the mental capacity to do it.
Okay, a couple of thoughts that I have. So question number one is, what happens if you have a risk manager? That's no longer self-control. It's sort of like just reporting to your boss, I suppose. So for example, like let's say you're a private trader, right? And you do as I suggest, which I suggest to everyone, which is get yourself a trading buddy, talk to them at least once a week. And so if for example, let's say I'm a trader and I trade the 1 hour charts, and my big problem is I take too many trades and I take subpar trades. I overtrade. I don't take the very best trades. And so every week I've got to report to my trading accountability partner and I got to tell her, this is what I did. This is the trade I took. This is why I took it. And then she looks at me every week and she goes, what are you doing? You're not following your rules. All right. This is what we're going to do. Next week, we're going to limit your trades. You can only take 9, right? 9 trades. If you take them all by Tuesday, then that's it. You can't take any more trades for the week. So I guess you could argue, if that works for me as a trader, because I know I'm going to have to talk to my trading accountability partner, and I know she's going to say, how many trades did you take this week? It's not really self-control, is it? It's kind of like, reporting to my boss, I guess. It's outside of me now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of more like risk control, because you've identified the risk in your self-control and you've implemented something to deal with that, where you're going to make mistakes. You've put a risk control in there to deal with that. What they found in this research about self-control was noticing that you need to use self-control that gets depleted. It's actually in the execution. So you can put something in there, to deal with the bit that you're going to fail with.
Right. So give an example. What's an example?
Well, like you said, having someone that you report to. It could be a trading buddy that when you see a trading setup and you're getting, this issue of self-control, do I take it, don't I take it, then you pass it over to someone who knows your system and say, is this a valid setup or not? And then they give you the answer. They're not involved in the trade. They can just be very black and white with the and then you execute the trade.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. And the other thought I had here, which was besides moving it outside of yourself and basically taking outside. So is it no longer self-control? I guess it's semantics. But the other thought I had was, if you read through like the Market Wizards books, what really jumps out to me are the number of market wizards who had a catastrophic loss for whatever reason, whether they risked too much or it was some sort of they risked too much on a trade, or they discounted a risk of the market basically running away and not enabling them to get out, or they weren't diversified, or whatever it was. They made some sort of mistake, and that kind of set them off in the right direction. Sort of like a smoker who quits cold turkey and says, that's it. I'm not going to smoke anymore. I'm never going to smoke. And I haven't touched a cigarette in 15 years or whatever, that sort of thing. So that's what it reminded me of when you read these stories, story after story of these traders who, and I guess these books were written in late 80s, early 90s, the Market Wizards and the New Market Wizards. I can link them up in the show notes if you're like the only trader out there who hasn't heard of them. But basically, I guess in theory, they could run out of self-control and then 25 years later, they make the same mistake. But it sure seemed like they learned their lesson. It sure seemed like that was like a catalyst that enabled them to kind of find the light, so to speak, and become a more consistent trader. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's an interesting thought. And also you hear these dieters, okay, they'll say things like, nothing tastes as good as fried bacon. No, it was nothing tastes as good as feeling good feels, or something like that. And so they have this mantra that they will recite every time they go by the ice cream shop. You know what I mean? Instead of going in there getting a donut or an ice cream, I just say, nothing tastes as good as feeling good feels, or feeling, or being thin feels, or something like that. I don't know the saying, but and it's like they're it's like they're using a technique or something, a strategy. Because I get what you're saying about the research, about, I guess, like a limited reservoir of self-control, and once you deplete it, it's gone. So what's the solution? Is it to move outside yourself and have a trading accountability partner? Like, for example, with dieting, people can think about the goal, think about the end result. I want to look like this. I want to feel like this. And so it's not worth it for me to eat that biscuit or, that ice cream cone or whatever. And it kind of refocuses them and recenters them on what's important. Is that a possibility, or what do you think, like, based on your research?
Definitely. I think, what we need to get past is this idea of, I've got a trading plan, just trade the plan. Because all the research suggests that that's not something that we can do. So, just having your trading strategy and saying to yourself, right, all I need to do is follow this trading strategy and I'll be all right, is missing the point. Okay, that's something that we're not built to do. Okay, so you need something a bit more than that. So you need to go beyond your technical trading strategy and look at the strategy to ensure that you execute it. Okay, so like we've talked about on a lot of other podcasts, you need to think about your psychology strategy. You need to have something in place, and they can be stops, like you say, or they can be trading buddies, or they can even be routines that you put into your trading strategy that aren't, about whether it's a setup or what you do with your stop loss. Things like, after taking a trade, you then go and run around the block, or you go and walk the dog, or something like that. So you need to think about that element of a strategy as well, which is what most people overlook.
Right. Or I just thought of a great thing, like if you're that trader that if you're that trader who needs that rush or whatever, you take your trade. What you do is you move next to like an amusement park, and you just live really close. You take that trade, and you've got your annual pass at the amusement park or whatever, and we'll just pretend that it's like they're open year round. And then you go in there and you just you scan your you scan your annual pass, and you go and ride the loop-de-loop roller coaster. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, and the trade's already locked in. It's already in.
Yeah. I mean, it's those things that nobody ever talks about in trading forums.
Yeah.
Nobody. You won't find you might find one thread in 5,000 that talks about these kind of ideas. But all of the study, all of the data suggests it is really, really important. So, there's the perception gap that's going on. When you look at the facts, if it's true that most of us lose and most of us make the same mistakes, okay, then, and most of us are using pretty much the same technical strategies, it has to be outside of that where the answer lies.
Yeah, it's
glaringly obvious, but the worst thing we do as humans is deal with the glaringly obvious, isn't it? Alcohol is legal in the UK, so everyone thinks it's fine. But the facts about the health risks from alcohol are glaringly obvious, but we overlook that. And then you have something that's illegal like cannabis, and we're all like in fear of it because the government say it's bad for you. The facts say, look, I don't think anyone's ever died from cannabis, but our perception of it is just completely the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so funny, isn't it? And what you were saying about alcohol, I think that's why when you try and get somebody off the alcohol or whatever, what happens is you have an intervention, right? You have like the family and the friends of the alcoholic, they all come in and they say, look, you really have a problem here. Because we all think, no, come on, you're just, it's not me, you know what I mean? And it's the same thing. Like, I don't really have a problem here. There's not, I've got this under control. I've got some self-control here. But really, you need like a trading accountability partner. You need a bunch of people to look you in the eye and say, nope. 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 This really is an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. All right. So in theory, So let's say you got your risk control right and you risk the precise amount you should. You got everything right about that in your trading. But if your self-control's out of whack, then you just go crazy. You take too many trades, and that can affect the risk, obviously. You do need to have both of them. I agree, you do. If I had to choose, I'd say, well, maybe I can get the risk down. And yeah, but self-control can still sabotage you, can it? It can still... Yeah.
Well, I'd say, I wouldn't say if your self-control is out of whack. I'd say your self-control is out of whack. Yeah. It is. You've just got to accept that. Self-control and just trade the plan is not going to work. It won't work for you. So you have to accept that first, definitely. And then I suppose what you need to do is in your risk control, you need to implement systems that deal with that fact. I think that is the approach. Like you say, even guys who've made a lot of money trading and perhaps even have funds have this issue with self-control. So it's not a question of intelligence or experience. It's a human emotion bias psychology issue, and you see, when people blow up, it's very rarely that they make one mistake and blow up. What tends to happen is they'll make a small mistake and they'll try and correct it, and they'll make another small mistake, and then they'll try and correct it by making a bigger mistake, and it kind of snowballs like that.
Yep.
Because they keep thinking that their self-control is going to help them out, but the more small mistakes they make, the less and less this resource gets depleted more and more, and they can do less and less about it, and it snowballs, and then they blow up, and then they're sat there 2 hours later saying, I just lost 70% of my account. How did I do that?
Yeah.
So I'd definitely say, your self-control is out of whack. Deal with that, rather than just, trying to fight against it.
Yeah. There's a book that I'll put in the show notes called Fake: My Life as a Rogue Trader by David Bullen. And it's a story about basically exactly what you just said there, how they took a Forex loss of 360 million. It's about an Australian bank, but it's exactly what you say about the snowballing thing, because that's true. I just want to share something with the listeners here. This is something that you're very interested in. The thing that I found most useful for me, and I've shared this with other traders, is to make a game out of it. So what you do is, to keep your self-control, what you do is you look at your trading system and you apply rewards based on how well you execute your trades, not based on whether it's a winner or a loser. So, and what that does is that the neuroscience behind that is you want to win the game, right? So you get a little hit. You get a hit of dopamine when you buy something. You get a hit of dopamine when you win, these little games on your watch or your phone or whatever. And that's kind of what I try to do with my trading is I set it up that way so that I get dopamine hits for following the system. And I don't go back and change things based on wins or losses. And it's just something that I found to be very useful. And I really think everyone should get a trading accountability partner. I think that's the number one thing. But if this is something that you're really into, then the other thing I would recommend is you make a game out of it, basically.
Yeah, cool. I will put the link to this article about self-control in show notes as well, because it's a really good read, and it's really interesting and quite eye-opening.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks a lot. It sounds very good. Well, thanks, Darren, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great to talk again, Walter. I will see you next week.
See you next time. Okay, bye.